This video made possible by Killer Visual Strategies. Visit killervisualstrategies.com.
Thanks so much, Todd. What I'm going to be talking about today is a topic that's very familiar to everybody in this audience, disruption. And the reason why I wrote this book, and the reason why I'm so passionate about this topic, is that I think that this world needs more disruption, but disruption that actually works, that creates a huge impact in terms of creating exponential change and growth. But I think we've been looking at disruption completely backwards. We keep looking for some technology or some disruptive innovation that's going to drive growth. But the reality is, growth is disruptive. And when companies really contemplate the fact that we could actually grow at huge rates, instead of stepping forward into that space, they step back because it means so many things have to change and it's disruptive. And so the key question I wanted to ask in the research that I did for this book was, how do you become a disruption victor and not a victim? How do you actually create disruptive exponential change? And what I found is that there are three things that disruptive organizations do very well. They do strategy, leadership, and culture in a completely different way. And I'm not talking about the usual suspects. I'm talking about some organizations that we know and love, but also some that we have never heard of. And they're all creating exponential growth. So let's go into these three things very quickly. Strategy. How is strategy different in a disruptive organization? They do one thing and one thing really well, and that is to focus on their future customers. So just raise your hand if you have a good idea who your future customer is. Any takers? Okay, a few. That's great. That's great. Now here's the other question. Does everybody in your organization know exactly who that future customer is? Hands go down. And this is the secret of disruptive organizations. They have invested tremendous amounts of effort to think about where that customer is going to be. And to paraphrase Wayne Gretzky, they skate to where the puck is going to be, not where it is today. And the reason why this is so important is that you can't even begin to think about what that future customer is unless you know who they are. You will not make the tough decisions, make the investments, make the sacrifices you have to do today in order to invest in that future. So without that vision, without that objective in the future, you're going to be grounded in today. And so when I work with organizations, I ask them, show me your strategic plan. They pull out a plan, it's usually for 12 months. I go, that's not a strategic plan, that's a budget. A strategic plan actually goes out into the future, says this is what we want to accomplish and this is what we will do today to accomplish that. Now let me give you an example of Adobe. Adobe, when they decided to move from packaged software to the cloud, they did this knowing that this customer actually didn't exist. Nobody was asking for subscription-based software in their Creative Suite. And yet that's what they decided to do. And they did this despite knowing that their income and revenues, their financial results would tank for 2 years. And as a publicly traded company, imagine you're the CFO saying, hey, I'm going to go to Wall Street and say, I got great news for you. We're going to take our revenue down. We're going to give you worse results to invest into that future. So let me show you what their numbers look like. This is indexed to Q4 2011. And you can see that the revenues over the next 2 years kind of muddled along at one level. Their income completely tanked, and yet look what happened to their stock price. It went up and up and up. This is rarely seen. You won't see this. Usually when income tanks, stock price tanks with it. And yet, Adobe was able to tell a really compelling story, a vision for where the company is going to go. And what is the stock price? Anything but a reflection of what the future potential for the company is going to be. So when organizations say, I can't do this because I can't take my results down, my shareholders, my stakeholders would never accept it. They will, if you will bring them along on this focus and this strategy for the future customer. So that's the first part, strategy. But leadership is also very different. When you're leading, you're actually creating change, because if you're not creating change, you're no longer a leader, you're just a manager. Yet when we create change, it's disruptive. And if you're going to create disruptive change, exponential change, it's going to be a tough, rocky journey. So think about creating a movement. Movements are so powerful because when you do it right, it moves without you. And I love this picture of Martin Luther King because it's a picture of him talking to the people on the Washington Mall. And as he stood there, he was fumbling for the words that he was going to say because he realized he had to say in those moments something that would inspire people. And his speech that day just wasn't cutting it. So somebody on the side says to him, Martin, tell him about the dream, Martin, tell him about the dream. And that's when those words came out that still resonate today. What are the words that you're going to say? What are the actions you're going to inspire? Because this is a long journey you're asking people to go on into this future. The obstacles people are going to have to overcome, your words and your vision need to carry them through those times. And I love this, again, this quote, that it's only a movement if it moves without you. So how do you have to lead very differently as a result? I thought I'd show you one example from here in Seattle with T-Mobile. When they became the Un-carrier, it wasn't just a tagline that had to change, everything had to change. And in particular, they created a manifesto that could hold the people within the organization to remember them. We're not going to be like the other carriers. We're going to do things differently. We're going to answer the phones differently. We're going to greet people in the store differently. And we're also going to lead differently. And the CEO, John Ledger, also had to change. So this is what he looked like when he came, the CEO. So pretty clean cut. You know what he looks like today, right? He looks completely different. He has grown his hair long, only wears black and magenta, even has this amazing slow cooker show on Facebook Live. 15 minutes of chaos in many ways. 5 minutes of cooking, 5 minutes of reading from the script over the T-Mobile promotions for the week, and 5 minutes of, in some cases, spraying Pam on the floor and dancing on it. Go figure. Over 6.5 million viewers, more than Sean Hannity has. What kind of following is he creating? What kind of movement is he making in terms of drawing the people into the Un-carrier movement? So think how you will lead differently, how you will sustain a different type of relationship with not just the people in your immediate vicinity, but into your entire organization and into your ecosystem, because that's what it takes to lead disruption. Now, the last area, I want to do this real quick, since I know this is a cool audience. Also, disruption is not an absolute. If you think about your ability to create disruptive growth, think about that. Are you a 1, meaning you don't like any change? I don't think there's anybody in this audience. But you could also be a 10, meaning you're really confident, you're constantly driving huge amounts of change. Can we pull up the lights just a little bit? Just pick a number here, and then just raise your hand as I count down from 10. So any 10s in this audience? Any 10s? Okay, a couple. Definitely want to talk to you afterwards. 9s. Okay, 8s. All right, more. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We just group those together. Now, the key here is that you don't necessarily have to be a 10 to be disruptive. You could be a 3, and your organization is a 2, and you're going to be like just creating things and changing a lot in that organization. But you could also be an 8. But if your organization is a 9 or a 10, you're the laggard. So this is not about having a higher number. It's about knowing your number. And go back and do this exercise with your team, with your organization. Figure out what your number is. How much disruption do you feel capable of doing? And do you need to increase your ability to create that change? Because what I found is that you can actually create disruptive leaders. You can develop them. You can change your number if you feel the need to. Do not be satisfied with the place where you are today. Say, where is that potential? Where is that future customer? And what is it going to take for me to lead my organization, my team, into that future? All right, now we're going to talk about culture. And I think of culture as being able to thrive with flux when you have a lot of disruption. And what's interesting about culture, we think that it's this thing that exists, and it just is, and can we really change it? And what I found in disruptive organizations is that they are very intentional about creating an organization that can just live and thrive with disruption. Because culture is fundamentally made up of two things. It's beliefs and behaviors. You change your beliefs, you change your behaviors. You can also change your behaviors to change your beliefs. And disruptive organizations have everything aligned in their organization to focus on those future customers again. The culture and the strategy and leadership all work together to create that disruption. And what I found in my research is that there are 3 beliefs that disruptive organizations constantly think about. The first one is openness. Openness around information being shared, the way decisions are being made. There's tremendous transparency to drive trust. And when you can move at the speed of trust, then you can move very, very quickly. Transparency also creates accountability. And there's a tremendous amount of accountability because of the openness in disruptive organizations. The second belief is agency. And this is not about empowerment, because empowerment says, I'm going to wait from somebody else to give me power. Agency says, I already have that power to be able to control my destiny. And the third is a bias for action. Disruptive organizations use what I call minimally viable data. As long as I have that data to make a decision, I'm going to make it as soon as I can, versus trying to get all the information and be bogged down by analysis paralysis. Now, when you're thinking about these beliefs, a key exercise you can do when you get back to your organization is to look at and say, what are the beliefs that are holding us back? Take a Post-it note with your team, write down all those beliefs, those behaviors, and put them on that wall. And agree, we will no longer subscribe to these beliefs that are holding us back. Then take some more Post-it notes. Write down the beliefs that are going to move us forward, and put them on another wall. And use those as a foundation for your culture. And then very importantly, cement them into your culture operating system. And what I mean by that are the rituals, the symbols, and the stories you will tell. This is one of my favorite rituals. LinkedIn has a Bring Your Parents to Work Day. And the idea here is there's a ritual, it's a shared experience, and sometimes it's in person, sometimes even virtual. But who do you call when you have a bad day? You call your family. And if they understand what you do at work, they can then actually support you in that. So what LinkedIn is doing through this ritual is to create a shared experience through the larger ecosystem of their employees and their families. It's a ritual they do every year to bring meaning into their employees' lives. Symbols are also very, very powerful, because when you have symbols, then it reminds people why they're there. This is the wall of gloves in the OXO office. So OXO makes various home goods. And it was created because the founder realized that his wife, with her weak arthritic hands, couldn't actually do things like peel things or do can opening. And so they made products to fit many, many different types of hands. So the employees went around New York City, found these gloves, washed them, brought them in, and hang them up on this wall. And it's a reminder every day when they walk into the office, who are we creating these products for? Old hands, small hands, arthritic hands, many different hands. It's a visual reminder. It's a symbol of why they work at OXO. And then stories are so important, because what are the stories we tell to reinforce what's important to us? And we all know the story of 3M, where 2 different people met together and created the Post-it notes. Totally random, but it also sends the message that innovation, disruption, ideas can come from anywhere. These hero stories are so valuable. So you may want to look into your vaults and say, where are the stories from our past that can actually move us to the future? Or even more importantly, what are the stories we tell ourselves today that are holding us back? Replacing them with the stories, with the symbols and the rituals can, again, help you create that cultural operating system to be able to move you forward. So we talked about strategy, leadership, and culture. But I want to leave you with one final thought. Disruption only happens when you're moving out of your comfort zone. This is the most telling part about disruptive organizations. People say to themselves, I'm not going to stand here in the status quo where I'm comfortable. I'm going to lead. I'm going to lead for this change. I'm going to step right up to the very edge and over that comfort zone. Take that leap and begin that journey. And my hope for you today is that you begin that journey, and also sustain that journey not only for yourselves, but for the people in your organization. Because the reality is there's so much work to be done. There's so much change that needs to happen to not make only our organizations better, but also our communities and our society. So I wish you all the best on your journey moving forward into your disruptive journey. I encourage you to please stay in touch with me. I put up this information at the end of every one of my talks, and nobody reaches out to me. And so please, I do mean this, connect with me on LinkedIn, email me, whichever way you're most comfortable with. I would love to hear where you are on your journey. I also am putting up my slides. You're more than welcome to just go to that URL and download them. And also my book is available at the registration desk. And again, I would love to hear how the book is helping you, how I could be updating it for future editions. Again, I wish you all the best, and I hope to connect with you at some point today. Thank you very much.